Lost Records Bloom and Rage, the so-called successor to Life is Strange, or at least it was supposed to be. Yet, over a year after its release, it's safe to say the game didn't find its audience, and even those it did were disappointed with it. But after the huge success of the first Life is Strange, Dontnod had the formula for interactive storytelling. So why was Lost Records such an utter failure? That's what we're going to discuss in this video. After Dontnod finished the first Life is Strange back in 2015, many were eagerly expecting what the developers, Dontnod, would do next. While there have been no shortage of Life is Strange games in the franchise, such as Before the Storm, True Colors, or even Double Exposure, the original studio left behind, or actually was told to leave behind the franchise, after a lukewarm reception of Life is Strange 2 back in 2018. However, this did not discourage the studio to stop releasing such games. For example, Tell Me Why, Twin Mirror, and Banisher's Ghosts of New Eden are just some of the games they released after Life is Strange 2. However, none of them were similar to the style and atmosphere of the first Life is Strange that the studio became so beloved for. On a surface level, Life is Strange seems to be the quirky, somewhat cringy retelling of teenage girls' complicated small-town lives, mixed with some supernatural powers and a dark, twisted mystery. But I would say the reason why most people fell in love with the game is because of its relatable, beautifully complex characters and the wonderful, atmospheric scenes they represent us with that take us back right to our childhoods. A childhood we can never explore again. Or can we? As we find out, of course, in the first Life is Strange, that Max is able to go back in time, not just a few minutes, but even decades, and change what her life turns out to be. But as the YouTuber Coconut Milk Films beautifully points out in their video, Life is Strange is mostly about toxic nostalgia, a constant desire lingering to a time we can never go back to, but Max can. But should she? These complex feelings and stories are the reason why Life is Strange is still talked about today. For the longest time, many thought that this game was a lightning in a bottle, something that Dontnod could never replicate again, or maybe wouldn't even want to. But one day, they announced a game called Lost Records Bloom and Rage, which looked eerily similar to the first Life is Strange. At a first look, it seemed to feature everything people loved in the first Life is Strange. Teenage female protagonists, quirky dialogue, a small town with mysterious people, and supernatural events. But if we compare the two games on Steam, the first Life is Strange has 95% on over 75,000 English reviews on Steam, but Lost Records has 87% on less than 3,000 reviews. There is a significant difference not only in the rating percentage, but on the number of reviews as well. So why did it fail so badly? There are a few main reasons to that, and I will divide them into 4 different chapters. If you're only interested in certain chapters, feel free to fast forward to certain segments. You can check the timestamps below. And also, this is a completely spoilery video. I discuss pretty much everything that happens in the story, and there are also spoilers to the first Life is Strange. Before we jump in, let's discuss the synapsis of Lost Records Bloom and Rage. Lost Records Bloom and Rage is a narrative-driven adventure set across 2 timelines, 1995 and the present day, following a group of teenage girls whose deep friendship is shaped by a mysterious and life-altering summer. In the past, the story centers on 4 friends, Swan, Nora, Autumn, and Kat, who spend their days filming memories, exploring their small town, and forming a tight friendship. What begins as a nostalgic coming-of-age story gradually takes a darker turn when they encounter a strange and possibly supernatural force that changes everything. In the present, the now adult women reunite after decades apart, forced to confront the truth about what really happened that summer, something they swore never to speak of again. As buried memories resurface, players uncover secrets, make choices that affect relationships, and piece together the events that fractured their friendship. One of the best parts of this game is the amount of detail they put into its environment. You get sucked into this American small town in the mid-90s with your little vintage camera recorder, capturing what you see around you. Yet, this also becomes the game's biggest downfall. Playing the game, you have this sort of hard-to-grasp feeling of waiting for something big to happen. You play the game, and you keep playing, and you keep playing, just waiting for it to finally happen. The hook that usually happens in at least the first few hours of a game. Like when Max gets her rewind powers and sees Chloe get shot by Nathan in the bathroom. Yet in Lost Records, this simply never happens. For me, it felt like they expected me to be invested just because it's nostalgic. It simply feels like the writers decided to never leave the exposition phase of their story, but instead to revolve the entirety around it. Pretty much the entire first episode is spent on how the four main characters met when they were teenagers and how they spent their weekends in their favorite spot in the woods. Nevertheless, we're presented with two different mysteries that take place in two different timelines. The supernatural void in 1995 and the mystery box Autumn receives, which inspires the girls, with the exception of Kat, to get back together at the diner in 2022. Throughout the story, there is some suspense as to what might be waiting for them in the box when they're older in the diner, or the supernatural forces going on in the 1995 timeline. But by the end of the game, both of these mysteries end up being either insultingly simple and underwhelming, or incredibly anticlimactic with no satisfying results for either our characters or the mysteries themselves. By the end, we do find out that the box contains different reliquia back from the girls' friendship in 1995, specifically focusing on the late Kat, but it never becomes clear who sent the box to them or why. This, in my opinion, not only makes the whole box storyline unsatisfying, but incredibly pointless, as there's no consequence to either the story or the girls' relationship from this. Imagine if when Chloe and Max go to the barn to find the dark room, they find nothing but letters from Rachel to Chloe. While it definitely would have been emotional, it would have added nothing substantial to the story, as we already knew about their deep relationship, and furthermore, the story wouldn't have been able to move on to its further mysteries with Nathan and Jefferson. Or worse, imagine spending the first 3.5 episodes around the mystery of Rachel's disappearance, only to never actually get to find out how and why it happened. But don't get me wrong, the issue is not that the supernatural aspects were not properly explained in this game. The first Life is Strange's supernatural elements weren't explained either. However, the latter story still worked because there were tons of other aspects to it that worked together simultaneously, such as Rachel's disappearance, Nathan's drama, Max's powers, Jefferson's obsession with innocence, and the expectation of what will happen when and if the storm comes. And I haven't even mentioned all the minor storylines with Kate, Warren, or even Dana, etc. Speaking of characters, let's move on to our next chapter, where we'll discuss why Lost Records characters just simply do not work. As a refresher, the story of Lost Records revolves around 4 teenage girls: Nora, Kat, Autumn, and Swan. Swan being the protagonist of the game. While the game has incredibly atmospheric and cinematic sequences of the girls becoming friends and going through this journey together, it never gets deep enough to become as memorable and iconic as Max and Chloe's, or even Chloe and Rachel's friendship/relationship. I think another major issue is the amount of main characters. With 4, we never get enough time to spend with them individually. Sure, we get a few scenes here and there when we see Swan hanging up on the girls, but everything that happens is still bound to their friendship, hobbies, and interests. Nothing comes up regarding their past, their families, or anything substantial really that would make each girl individual. The only one that comes to mind to me at this moment is Nora mentioning something about her mother, but we spend so little time on that storyline that it's honestly pointless. Seriously, if you swap the personalities of each girl, not much would change in the story. The only girl that gets some extra screen time about her past is Kat. But even those few scenes are uninteresting and painfully surface level. Having an annoying older sister, and the older sister having a stupid boyfriend, typical tropes. And if the 4 main characters are already surface level, you can imagine how much worse the side characters are. So much so that I had to look up all their names because I couldn't remember anybody. The only 2 side characters that are even worth mentioning are Dylan and Corey, Kat's elder sister and her boyfriend. Dylan in the beginning is a very irritating, shallow character. There's not much nuance to her, and the most interesting thing about her is her relationship with her boyfriend Corey, who is kind of your typical teenage jock. Don't get me wrong, I am aware that the first Life is Strange's characters also had some stereotypical ones. The punk rock girl being Chloe, the shy girl being Max, a toxic stepfather, etc., etc. But throughout the 5 episodes of the first Liz, there's so much nuance and deep complexity to each of these characters. Not to mention, most of them, even the side characters, bring forth either a controversial or rarely discussed topic, such as Kate's religious issues, Nathan and Chloe's mental health, David's PTSD. Even Joyce could be considered a morally grey character, with her abandoning Chloe's care to David, essentially a stranger. Morally grey. That is the perfect phrase to describe why the Lost Records characters just do not work. Everyone's either morally bright or morally black. There's not one character who is truly morally grey. When at the end of episode 1, we find out about Kat's sickness, and Dylan gets angry at the girls, and Corey carries Kat away, there was some potential there. Is Corey more than he seems? What's going on behind Kat's family? Who is Dylan really? But alas, there was only one more episode following those events, which was not even closely enough to finish the story. As I said previously, they barely even leave the exposition phase, even by the end of episode 1. We don't find out more about Dylan, we never even meet Kat's family, and Corey simply becomes even more morally black than he was in episode 1. We don't know how and why all this happens, it just simply does. And I haven't even mentioned my biggest issue with all of this. What about the other girls' stories? Why has Kat suddenly become the main focus of the story, when she was barely a side character, considered as one of Swan's friends until the very end of episode 1? Imagine playing the first Life is Strange, and after the second episode, we start following Kate's life after her attempt to end her life. We don't see Chloe, David or Frank anymore, just Kate, Max, Jefferson and Nathan. No matter how much people love the characters of the first Life is Strange at this point, there's no denying that the reason why we all became initially interested in the game was because of Max's rewind powers. It was a mechanic that we'd never seen in a game before, and having the ability to change your decisions after making them seemed intriguing for players used to strict choice-making games where there's no turning back time. When you're releasing a game, especially a game with no combat and no exploration options, you need to introduce some interesting and unique gameplay mechanics that had never been done before in another interactive storytelling game. There is a reason why Telltale eventually fell off. While the XYZ character will remember that, and the QTE cutscenes were interesting and new at first, after the 7th game with the same mechanics, people grew tired of their formula. Unfortunately, this is another aspect in which Lost Records fails. Besides the ability to record certain people and objects with Swan's camera, which have no bearing on the actual story or events that occur by the way, and you're literally standing in one place for duration, and adding timers to certain choices, Lost Records introduces no other aspects to its gameplay. You walk around, look at things, record some birds or trees, talk to the girls, hang out with them, find a big hole in the forest. That's pretty much the first episode. And most of the second one, summed up in a sentence. I understand why they didn't give Swan any powers. Comparisons are already plenty to Life is Strange, so they wanted to avoid any further ones. But the game desperately needs something to stand out. You might also think that I'm making an unfair comparison, since Life is Strange is mostly rooted in its supernatural aspects, and Lost Records is rooted in reality, with a pinch of the supernatural. But then I can mention another game, in the same franchise actually, that did a much better job at evolving / renewing its gameplay mechanics. Life is Strange Before the Storm. Before the Storm's main character was Chloe, who has no supernatural powers whatsoever. It's the story of Rachel and Chloe before the first Life is Strange, their relationship with each other and others in Arcadia Bay. However, they did introduce new gameplay mechanics that were actually not only new, but fitting to the story. Chloe's backtalk ability. While it's not as major as manipulating time and space, it did offer something fun to the gameplay and kept it more interesting during longer dialogue sequences. Returning back to Lost Records, I think what could have made the game a lot more interesting was introducing something more interesting with Swan's camera. Maybe recording certain things and not recording others could have major consequences on the world around us, or the characters, or certain clues could have been found in the recordings that could change the outcome of the story. Another step they could have taken that would have made the 1995 timeline a lot more interesting to play is Swan's relationship and choices with Nora, Kat, and Autumn having a much bigger impact in the 2022 timeline, possibly altering not only their relationships, but also the mystery itself. Certain choices with Nora and Autumn can end up making your relationship more warm or cold, and Nora can even leave the girls behind, but none of these impact the story itself too much, and leave no lasting effect on the players, or honestly even Swan and Autumn themselves. I remember in my playthrough, Nora left, and Swan and Autumn moved on pretty quickly, almost as quickly as I moved on from this game after finishing it. This is an interesting topic for me, and many games have been struggling in this regard recently, while others are thriving. So let's see why this is the case. I believe one of the major reasons for the first Life is Strange's success was its episodic release. Honestly, to really understand what it was like, you had to be there during 2015. The 2/3 month break between each episode gave fans the opportunity to write many theories, delve deeper and deeper into not only the mystery of the main story, but all the hidden details and Easter eggs in the game. The game stayed with people and was on their minds even though they were only playing it every other month, and we were eagerly waiting for the day of a new episode release. The 2010s was also the golden decade for YouTube. Short-form content like Instagram Reels and TikTok videos didn't exist yet, so long-form content was thriving. Everyone was making gaming playthroughs and were getting millions of views, which further helped spread the popularity of certain titles. Life is Strange was an especially popular choice for streaming as it's a more laid-back cinematic title, enjoyable for both players and viewers. The episodic release was also beneficial for Donut financially. They announced that they had sold 1 million copies of the game even before the release of episode 4 in July. Since the first episode was released around the end of January, it took them less than 6 months to achieve that milestone. For a studio that was about to file for bankruptcy, that's an incredible achievement. Since then, Dontnod has confirmed that over 20 million people have played the first Life is Strange. Dontnod tried to replicate the same success with Life is Strange 2, but it was an utter disaster. They released the first episode of Life is Strange 2 back in September 2018, and were planning to release the whole game in the span of a year, but thanks to multiple delays, the game ended up releasing its last 5th episode in December of 2019. It seems that Dontnod has placed the blame on the poor sales of Life is Strange 2 on its episodic release disaster. However, there's plenty of other reasons for that. We'll not go too deep on that topic here, but the failure of Life is Strange 2 was a key factor towards Lost Records' release schedule. After the disastrous release schedule of Life is Strange 2, Dontnod tried to balance the two ways you can release a game. They still had a sort of episodic release with Lost Records, but not as broad as the first Life is Strange and Life is Strange 2. Lost Records had 2 episodes, tapes more like, which were released 2 months apart from each other. While the time span between the 2 episodes was the same length as it was with the first Life is Strange episodes, there were 2 main issues with Lost Records. 1. There was nothing of interest to theorize or discuss for fans after the end of tape 1. And 2. There was only one opportunity for fans to speculate and spend time watching other people play it on YouTube or play it themselves. Whereas with Liz 1, fans had the chance to do this 4 times after each episode, each time giving more and more people to familiarize themselves with the game and the community. There is a reason why it took almost 4 episodes to reach the 1 million milestone for Donnad. It takes time to build up a good mystery, and for people to get deeply attached to your stories and characters. I remember that after the release of episode 2 of the first Life is Strange, people were still quite skeptical and were worried about the potential future of the game. It only started picking up momentum after the release and huge twist at the end of episode 3. You see what I'm trying to say here? Lost Records didn't even have an episode 3, or 4, or 5. How do you expect to achieve the same success with your game if you only partially follow the same formula for its release? Imagine if the first Liz ended after Max saves Kate from the roof at the end of episode 2, right when the story was just picking up. Or after the end of episode 3, when you jump into a different timeline. And there you have it. I'm very sorry if I sounded like I was really shitting on this game. I did not hate it as passionately as it might have sounded like. I'm just incredibly disappointed with Donnad on why they cannot seem to do as great of storytelling as they used to with the first Life is Strange. Especially because I do not want studio execs to think there is no interest in elevated storytelling in gaming. Many other studios are able to not only keep up but even level up with their sequels. Just think of Uncharted, Mass Effect, or The Witcher. In certain ways they always change, but the core stays the same. And now it's your turn. Tell me what you think. Whether you agree with me or disagree with me, I would love to hear your opinions in the comments down below. Make sure to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, talk openly about your opinions. See you in the next one.